Leave this spot, what, no, there's cords everywhere. It's been 4 days with good spelling tips. She is kindergarten. So good morning, y'all. Thank y'all for coming. I'm sorry that we're not over there. We got mixed up somehow, but here we are, and we're all happy. My name's David Woodard. I'm the tourism director of Tazewell County. If you don't know me, my cards are over here, and I'll pass those out with some pens before we leave here. And Sandy is going to do this program for us because we have a desperate need for beds, especially here in the Tazewell area with the motorcycles that we have coming in town. We don't have anywhere to put them, and Marion, we love Marion, but they're obviously the ones capitalizing on overnight stays because we don't have enough beds. So this seemed like a good solution. So here's Sandy.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. This isn't my real voice. I've been fighting with pollen, and hopefully the rain over the weekend will settle things down. But thanks for taking the time to come this morning. This is something we've been looking at for a while, and it was actually a request with the Thompson Foundation, who has been putting money into Buchanan and Tazewell counties to try to help with business development and so forth. Before I tell you who I am, I would love if we could go around the room, introduce yourself. If you're doing an Airbnb or you're looking at it, that would help us greatly. So we'll just start right here. Introduce yourself. And
Cindy Eastep. I'm not doing an Airbnb. I'm from the Commissioner's office here.
Okay, good to have you.
I'm Margie Douglas. I'm at the Small Business Development Center at Southwest Virginia Community College.
Teresa Morrow. I'm doing an Airbnb.
Good.
Donna Pridgeon, with Tazewell County Realty, and my husband and I have a cabin, a log cabin that we are considering in Thompson Valley, considering doing Airbnb.
Okay.
I'm Cecilia Himes. My husband Mike just stepped out because he had a conference call this morning. But we own the brick building that you see right here called the old jail. And we are not doing Airbnb, but seriously looking at it.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, I'm Brianna Fillers. My husband and I are thinking about doing an Airbnb with a garage apartment that's beside of our house.
I'm Trish Deal. My husband and I actually have property in Buchanan and Tazewell County, some in Thompson Valley that we're thinking about developing for a small rental for the specifically catering to the bike riders.
Good.
I'm Diana Wells, and I'm very interested in this museum.
Good. Good.
I'm Charlotte Whitten. I'm the director of Crab Orchard Museum, and we have the cottage and crab orchard there on site. It's a 2-bedroom house. We don't use Airbnb, but we want to know how it works. Cindy Ringstaff. I also work at Crab Orchard Museum.
I'm Lorraine Denton, and I'm looking at doing an Airbnb in my house. I live right on the back.
Good.
Bob Gilmore, we're considering doing an Airbnb, and also I have Ishmael Novice Furniture on Main Street. So if you want to furnish your Airbnb.
We have some furniture.
I'm Cindy Nicholson. I live in Burke's Garden, and I and a business partner are in 2 houses. One of them is in vacation rental by owner, the other is being rented through Airbnb.
And I'm Joe Morton. I'm with Heart of Appalachia Tourism. We represent the 7 westernmost counties in the state, as well as the city of Norton. And here to get just a little info. Great to see this big a turnout. And as David mentioned, we desperately need the rooms. We do have a reservation system on our website now. We don't actually book the rooms, but it's a reservation portal, and we'll be glad to put anybody on there for free. And we also provide assistance with getting a web page up and running if you need to do that, and also setting up PayPal. So if we need to do any of that, we'll be glad to assist with that. But just see me before you leave if you're getting close to getting everything up and running.
I'd just like to say your host, Michael, just worked out a website for us. And I saw the way it looks through, and what it does is your booking system connects to what we've already got. It connected us to Airbnb for one house and to the Airbnb. This is great. Thank you.
Excellent. We're introducing ourselves.
I'm Linda Harrison.
Hi, good to have you here. Do you have an Airbnb? Are you looking at doing one?
Looking at doing one.
Okay.
Good morning, Charlie Stacy. I'm with the Tazewell County Board of Supervisors, but I'm always interested in business opportunities, so I figured I'd stick my head in.
Good. Michelle, this is all your audience.
Hi guys, I'm Michelle Workman. I'm the development specialist with Virginia Tourism, Virginia's for Lovers, and I live in Bluefield, so I can be a resource to tap into our services and help in any way I can. So happy to help.
Well, great. Oh, we have some. Oh, yes. Hi. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Barbara McChesney, and as I approach retirement, I'm thinking this would be a great opportunity.
Excellent. Excellent. So everybody know? Did you introduce yourself? Okay.
I'm Terry Kirk. I'm a business owner in Bluefield, Virginia. We've got First Blessing Daycare, and I run a farm in Bluefield, Virginia, too.
Great. Well, good. We got a good diverse group this morning. This presentation's a little different. I've got some Airbnb owners that's part of this presentation. It's not here, but I had videotaped them to share their experience in starting. So you get to hear not just from me, but how they have used Airbnb to increase their sales and their way of making a living. A little bit about who I am. Why is Virginia Community Capital doing this? If you're not familiar with Virginia Community Capital, we are a community development financial institution that has a for-profit bank, but we operate as a nonprofit. That allows us to do projects throughout Virginia that we look at basically the impact in that community and the job creation. Even though we have a bank, we operate a little different than a bank. We do investments and we do lending like any other bank, but we also look at the overall picture and how we can impact. I've told people a great example, if you've been to St. Paul in the last couple of years and you saw the Western Front Hotel, that's something that we were able to invest in to help, because that's really sparked a change in downtown St. Paul. Although we need more lodging, which is why we're here today. So this is a workshop. If you have any questions throughout it, please don't hesitate to stop me. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Before I get started and get carried away, one of the things that we're doing, I mentioned about Thompson Foundation supporting growth in Southwest Virginia. This coming fall, thanks to the towns and the county, we're going to be doing a business challenge contest. We've got one underway presently in Buchanan County, but this is basically, you have a chance to, we have over 15,000 in prizes for startup and existing businesses. It's 6 weeks class where you learn steps to not only starting, but how do you grow your business. We'll have a panel discussion with lawyers, CPA, lending agencies that you can ask those kind of questions. So hopefully after those 6 weeks, you get a lot of questions answered that you've been thinking about. But we also, you'll be graded on your business pitch. We'll have a little one night that's kind of like Shark Tank, that you pitch your business idea and you're graded, and then you submit a business plan and you're graded on that. And the high scores could win $5,000 for a startup, and then we have second and third in the same way with existing business. So it's a great opportunity for you to not only build your skills, but also have a chance of winning some money to help you get started and incentivize your business. So enough of that. We're going to talk about Airbnb. I'm sure everybody in here has heard about what Airbnb is, but it's basically, it started in 2008, and it's a way for individuals like yourself that can Put your properties up on this site, and I, as a traveler, can basically reserve that space, and all of the transactions and so forth can go through Airbnb. So you can rent out an entire home. I know we have people in the Tri-Cities area, when the Bristol race is in town, they leave to go on their vacation and they rent out their entire homes. Or you can have a private room. A lot of people now that you have the empty nest where your children have left and you've got these 2 or 3 bedrooms that are sitting empty. Well, maybe they can generate some revenue for you. So these are things that we'll think about today. Why we want to do this for Southwest Virginia, as David mentioned, we need additional lodging opportunities here in Southwest Virginia because we're now concentrating on our above ground assets. For years we've always concentrated on our below ground assets, which is coal and gas. Now we're looking at this beautiful nature that we have and bringing tourists in. So they have to have a place to spend at night. It creates an opportunity for, housing and rental options. It gives visitors a choice over staying at a hotel, and we're seeing that millennials prefer to stay in Airbnbs and these types of environments over the flagship type hotels. And plus, especially for outdoor recreation, they can hopefully space that's got a place where they can bring in their truck and trailer with their ATVs, and they have that kind of room versus at a flagship hotel. And again, it addresses the visitor demand and supply, and it kind of reinvents Southwest Virginia as a tourism hub. So these are why we want you to look at using Airbnb for your properties. Now, how Airbnb has impacted Virginia alone last year, and this is right off of Airbnb's website, over 750,000 guests stayed in 40 Virginia counties last year. 7,000 of those just stayed in Washington County alone, which is where I live. Typical Airbnb supplemental income is about $5,500 per Virginia host business. Airbnb host communities earned nearly $104 million in supplemental income last year. So we know that this is growing, and it's projected to continue to grow, and hopefully you all can get a piece of that, those cash registers ringing in your pockets. I don't know if you can see this slide from back there, but the statistics shows that Airbnb is going to continue to grow throughout the United States and Europe through 2020 and above. So how Airbnb works, has everybody stayed at an Airbnb, or you got an idea? Okay, so we're starting from scratch. What it does is you set up an account, and I'll walk you through that process of setting up an account on Airbnb. And when you start booking rooms, Airbnb takes 3% commission off every booking, and that can be from the host and about 6 to 12% from the guest, and that depends on your area. And I know later in this presentation, Dave's going to share a little bit about how Tazewell County and the towns look at Airbnb from a standpoint of taxes and regulations. This is becoming a hot topic in about every county and town and city government in Virginia and elsewhere. I know I just read an article yesterday that Richmond, the city of Richmond, is going to have a big meeting talking about how the short-term rental, how they're going to look at that going forward. Now, I don't know if you know this lady. This is Eva Belay with River Cliff Cottages, but she also has Adventure Mendota. Eva participated in the Washington County Business Challenge, and it took her 2 tries to win, but she has Adventure Mendota in Mendota, Virginia, where she does kayak rental. And her and her husband, when they retired, moved back to Mendota, and they wanted to do something. They didn't want to retire or just sit idle, and they had the clinch going right in front of their home, and that's where they came up with the idea of renting kayaks about 4 years ago. In that time, Eva converted an apartment that she had over her garage into short-term stay, and just about I guess about 8 months ago that she started Airbnb. So I want to let Eva kind of share with you why she got into Airbnb.
My name is Eva, and I live in Medina, Virginia, and I have an Airbnb there. I've had the structure, it's a standalone garage apartment, actually, so it's detached from our house, and it's been on the property for 15 years. It was a caretaker's cottage at one point. And then in July, I decided to try my hand at Airbnb. I never dreamed anyone would come out to Medina, Virginia and stay with me, but I thought, I'll give it a try and see. And I was very pleasantly surprised. One of the most fun things about having an Airbnb versus getting that payment after they check out is meeting the people and learning why they come. It wasn't for the same reasons that I thought they would come. Since we have a river outfitter, I thought that I would get guests because they want to kayak and stay at my property. And that's happened a few times, but more likely they're staying at the property and they learn about the kayaking, which is different than I thought it would be. But the people, they all have different motivations. We're 17 miles from a grocery store, and I thought that would be a real detriment, and it probably is in terms of volume. But a lot of my guests are looking for that out-of-the-way place that is quiet. One of my favorite guests was working on a cookbook. She needed away from her children and her family, and she came down for 2 days and worked on a cookbook. Another young lady came and worked on her thesis. Other people, they're just motivated to give an opportunity to someone in our area who's trying to do something different. Well, I had a slight advantage because I stayed in an Airbnb, and I noticed what I liked and didn't like. So the first thing I did was I took a long look at my property, and I determined what would be the negatives and the positives. The first thing that I had complete control over was cleanliness, and I cleaned it from top to bottom. I made everything accessible and put notes on where to find things. Instead of just having a bunch of things under my kitchen sink to wash dishes with, I organized them. I put them in baskets. I labeled and made it easy for my guests to find how to scrub a pot, what dish detergent to use in the dishwasher, what to use in the sink, those types of things. I never assume that they're going to know where something is or find something. So I had to take a long, hard look at the whole property like that, focused on cleanliness and organization. The one thing that bothered me, it bothers me in hotels and it bothers me in Airbnb. Everybody wants to watch TV at night. There's nothing to do generally. You want to watch the news or do something. Learning how to use that remote. And I put very clear remote instructions out. I've got them everywhere because that seems to be a topic that, especially if there's a man over there, they got to have their TV on. So that's one of the things that I did, just looking at every part of that property, and is it clean? What would it look like to a stranger? Trying to look at it with their eyes instead of my eyes. Thinking what would set me aside, because I am in a further location than an Airbnb in Bristol. And in my case, I decided on a limited basis to be pet friendly. Also, I decided to market myself as that remote place in Southwest Virginia and try to turn a negative into a positive. In our case, we had an existing LLC called Ratliff Farms that houses my Adventure Mendota, the kayaking park. So this just became another leg in that LLC. We did have to talk with insurance companies and get some advice about that, but it just became another part of the revenue stream for Ratliff Farms. So when Airbnb gives me the money that I earn, it goes right into that and becomes part of our income. At Airbnb, I think the reason they are successful is they do make it easy for the novice. In my case, my delay was I wanted to have the very best pictures. I still don't have the best pictures. I aspire to have better pictures, but that was my delay. In terms of uploading those pictures and writing about my property that I had to offer, Airbnb led me through that process. I could be creative in talking about the property, but they led me through the process. It was very easy, and it's a matter of just sitting down and doing it, and not procrastinating. And then it's so fun when you get your first message, and it's a guest who is interested in staying with you and they're inquiring about your property, and you realize this really is going to work. Also, the payment processing part, very simple. Airbnb takes care of all of that for you. All you see is that deposit going into your account, which is pretty fun.
So Eva pointed out a couple of good things that you all need to think about. One, she had an existing business, so she set her Airbnb under that existing LLC. You can set it up under, just a regular sole proprietor. That's up to you. I would suggest that you reach out to your CPA or an attorney, or Margie, of course, can help you. But that's something you need to think about. Another thing is, what's your niche? What makes you different? Now, I did this presentation last week up in Allegheny County in Clifton Forge, and some folks didn't even have. They just had the very basics. When you talk about a log cabin, all they had is electricity. They didn't have TV. They didn't have internet, because there's some people that want that getaway. So you got to figure out what is your niche and what you want people, your guests, to be appealing to them. Some other things she thought about, and we'll talk about more, is insurance. You need to consider those types of things. And you've got to have a commitment, because you'll see in some of the other presentations through this is cleanliness, and you want that customer experience, because those customers are going to be giving you, hopefully, great write-ups on the Airbnb, that their experience, and you want to aspire to be a super host. When you become a super host, you've got the top. As in online sales, you would become the Amazon of online sales. So those are things that you need to think about that Eva shared. It's pretty easy to set up an account. You basically just go to Airbnb, create your account. It could be under your name, under your property name, however you want to do it. That's totally up to you. And then you start uploading photos. And I'll show you through the process of how you go about that.
Setting up an Airbnb account is very easy. Just go to Airbnb Inc., create an account. You can use your existing Facebook account or Gmail account, or set up your own. I used set up a new Gmail account just to make things easier, to keep things separated. Just fill in the information, your password, and all the other information that they request.
I'm not going to say if the year is correct. That's between me and my mother.
That you don't ever receive marketing messages from Airbnb. That's your decision. After you've completed everything, just simply hit sign up, and you go from there. Of course, they want you to make sure you have read all the information and you agree to their terms. And if you do and you want to proceed, just hit accept. Now, this is where you start populating the information about your property. Is it a house? Is it a room in your home? What type of home is it? There are a number to choose from. Pick the one that best describes your property. Is it going to be the entire home? Is it going to be a bedroom in your home? Again, these are all things that you pick out and decide. Now it wants to learn more about your home, how many bedrooms, how many beds are in each bedroom. All of this information, again, is going to go into populating your account to give potential stayers more information about what you have to offer. And I encourage you to spend time on this and make sure you include everything, because you may offer something that your neighbor down the street or the next community over does not offer. So take time to make sure you have all of this information completed. Help people find where you're located at. So put your address, but they can find you in searches if they're looking for a location in Grundy, Richlands, Tazewell, Abington, Clifton Forge. Make it easy for you to be found, because you're going through all this for a reason. Make it easy. Don't make assumptions.
It's not coming out. I'll have to do it later. You think you got it?
I have a question.
Answer.
Is there a legal number of people that you can actually have? I mean, are there some guidelines or something about the number that you can?
Yes, we're going to go through that because that's part of, your fire code and that type of thing. So what do you want to get out of being an Airbnb host? Is it that you want to just make a few extra bucks and major holidays, major events that are going through? Do you want to make this a secondary source of income that's a steady stream coming in, or do you want to make this become your primary? And I know that there's people in other parts of the country that this is all they do, and they have hundreds of properties, and they're making millions of dollars a year. But that's a lot that you have to take care of. Every time somebody checks out, you've got to clean that room. There's just a lot to look at. But that's up to you. You've got to make that decision. We can't make that decision for you. So you've got to figure that out. What do I want to do? Just make a little extra income during a holiday, or do I want to make this a great secondary source of income for me? Now, when you're getting set up, some things that you need to think about. First of all, I highly, 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 highly recommend that you reach out to your circuit court clerk or your commissioner of revenue in wherever the county, the town, the city that you live, to see what their requirements are for short-time lodging. Every location is different. If your property is in a residential area and you have a homeowners association that you have to abide to, you better make sure that that's allowed within that subdivision or that development. There are some rules out there that restrict that you cannot go over 30 days. For example, in Clifton Forge, they have a lady has a short-term piece of property, and she has nurses that work at the hospital that rent her space. So every 29 days, they have to re-rent that space because there is a code in Clifton Forge. So you have to know that, and there's no way I can keep up with all that. But you need to know what that is and keep up with the code. And I know just about 2 weeks ago, Washington County Board of Supervisors is hiring a consultant to do a study to determine all the Airbnb short-term properties in Washington County to make sure, they are collecting the taxes from that. As I said earlier at the beginning, communities are taking this very serious because it's growing, and they want to make sure they're not missing out on the revenue and that the taxes that are due to them they're receiving that. Another thing that when I've talked with a number of owners of Airbnbs is the first thing they did when they decided, well, I want to do this, is they started decluttering the space. One of the things you might want to do is take out personal, your family pictures or anything like that. Kind of, declutter and make this, they're just coming for an overnight or just stay a few days. So, make that, that's totally up to you. But I don't know that I would want pictures of my families on the wall when strangers are coming, so you have to make that determination. That's just the way I feel about it. But make sure it's tidy. Even mentioned about having a professional photographer. She wished she had done that at the beginning. and most of the others that I've talked about, that's key, because when they're looking at your space on the Airbnb site, if it's a grainy, dark picture, you're not going to stand out versus your competitor. So you want to put your best foot forward, right, when people are looking at space. So you might want to, if you don't feel like you can take good enough pictures, reach out in the community and see if you can find a professional photographer to do it. Now, in some major cities, Airbnb will even send out a photographer. I don't think we're in that population density to do that, but I'm sure there's some photographers around here, but that's your judge. I would recommend you go to Airbnb website and just start looking at the properties and look at those that are here in Tazewell, Bluefield, Richlands, and contiguous areas and see how they look. Once you've got your pictures the way you want it, then you'll start listing that and putting that up in your profile. And again, you can decide if you want to make that experience, you're going after a certain type of clientele. Note that, in your description of your properties, kind of highlight that, make that profile. That's your personal. This is your opportunity. When you develop a brochure, it's that paragraph that describes those 2 or 3 sentences. You want to do a good job describing your property to make it appealing to that individual. And if there's a certain audience, maybe it's outdoor recreation, kind of include that. You're so many miles away from this ATV trail. You're so many miles away from Back of the Dragon. Whatever it is that's appealing to your clientele, include that. And you might want to change that periodically. If you know that the Back of the Dragon is having a big event, then go up on your profile and maybe enhance that, that you're so many miles away, and have those kind of things in there. Oh, it was a fly. Don't do that anymore. You could have bought a cow at the auction. Now, this lady actually has 2 properties or multiple properties, but she's out west. She's in Arizona and Montana and up in that area. But again, I want to give you all different perspectives of different folks in different areas that operate Airbnb. So she was kind enough to do this video interview.
And you can start with your own photos. That's what I did in both of my properties. It's okay, but I do notice a difference. I now have professional photos on both listings, and it's not only the quality of the photos as the eye of the guest sees it, it's also that the higher quality is detected by the system of Airbnb and will help in your rankings. But again, no reason to jump in and spend a whole lot of money up front. Particularly, one thing to note is that you will, as a brand new host, receive a bump in the listings, so you're automatically put at the top to promote you. Take the best photos you can, try different angles, show them to friends, see what they think looks good, then pop them up on Airbnb, get a couple of reservations. That helps you pay for those upgrades that you want to do later.
Great, thank you.
By the way, helping me in that interview, you may have met Vivek Patel with Ascent, Virginia. This is a consulting firm out of Northern Virginia that's really fallen in love with Southwest Virginia, and they're wanting to use their expertise to help us identify new projects and help increase tourism in Southwest Virginia. So Joyce is a friend of Vivek, and he helped me with that interview. I love technology when it works. Now, when you're thinking about your pricing structure, again, I would highly recommend that you go and get on Airbnb and look at properties near you. You don't want to be the cheapest guy, I don't think, but do you want to be the most expensive? If you are, then you've got to show just cause why you want to be that. And that's in your description of what makes you different. Maybe it is that cabin, that experience, and that you've got a trail, whether that be horseback riding or whatever it is to make that experience. Another thing too, when you're looking at this, and if it is just something that you are going to supplement your income and you're working full time, that you need to think about, if you're just going to do one night, if you're going to allow one night stays, you've got to figure out, I've got to find time that I have to go and flip that property, which means you got to change the sheets, you got to freshen it up, take out the trash and so forth. Now, some people will not consider less than a 2 or 3 night stay. Others, they don't mind it. Like Eva, she's fine with doing it one night. So you got to figure out your audience and how you want to do it, because if this becomes a source of income, it's going to make it a commitment. And so you got to figure out, okay, I need a couple of hours each day. If I am going to flip this, depends on how much activity you get from rental property. So that's either you do it or you're going to hire someone to come and do that cleanup work. But it has to be done. The worst thing you could do is have someone come and the sheets be dirty, there's trash in the trash bin, food rotten in the refrigerator. I mean, all of those kind of things. You will not become a top, a super host in that manner. So you've got to, you know, especially if it's property, you know, you don't want, they have to walk through grass up to their knees, you know, there's those things too. Not only the inside, but the outside. You want it to make it appealing, correct? So you need to figure out what you want to do. Also, when you're thinking about your pricing structure, there may be, you know, you want to look right now. David, what is the hottest tourism months for Tazewell? When does it start?
September, October.
So there's where you can increase your prices when the demand is higher. If you're going through the outdoor recreation, you might want to start April through November, and you have a little higher rate versus those slow months in December through March. You may decrease your rates. But I can tell you, as someone that has stayed at Airbnbs, I don't always look at the cost. It's what does that offer and the environment that it's going to be in. Now, I cannot be off the grid. I'm sorry, these devices, David will tell you, I've got more gadgets. I have to be on the grid, so that would be one thing I want to find out. Do you have high-speed internet? I don't care if you have cable, as long as you've got high-speed internet. I do most of my watching on my devices anyway. But again, knowing your audience and who you want to target, that's going to be important to you. And keep an eye out on your competitors' pricing too. Look at that. Again, do your investigating. And it may be not just here. Look at parts of West Virginia. That's part of your competition. In Grundy, you've got Pikeville in those areas that you want to look at. So see what your competition's doing. That's the best way to look at your rates. Again, you want to look at the length of nights, the number of guests. That's where we come in. If you have a 2-bedroom space, then you probably don't want more than 6 people, even if you have a pull-out bed, but you have to outline that you limit this amount of guests in there, and that's in the agreement, and you need to put that. Another thing that I will point out too is when we get into graduation season and kids are having parties, or we have a lot of weddings and you have bachelor parties and so forth, that's where you need to put that limit. Someone was telling me in Allegheny last week that a friend of hers had a tiny house, and until the police called her, they didn't know that there was like 30-some people on the balcony of this little tiny house. You can't imagine the destruction that was taking place, but it was that little thing that I failed to put that in there, because if you don't put it in there, you have no recourse. You didn't tell them that I couldn't have a party there, or I couldn't have 20 people there. Yes?
Well, that kind of begs the question, don't they have some insurance, Airbnb cover?
Yes, and I'll talk about that. But still yet, you know, that meant that hurt the other guests that were behind them. So, but put it out there. You want more than, you want to protect yourself, that you have some type of recourse. Now, again, talking about pricing and rental, I'll let Eva mention how she came up with hers.
I set my rates a couple of ways. I looked at other Airbnbs in the area, and I looked at their property and my property. But I also, I didn't set mine to be the lowest, and I'm not the highest. I think I have a very good value, but I set it with what I could live with. I felt like I tried to be fair, but I did look at what everybody else is offering, and I am a little bit higher in some cases. The reason I allow myself to be a little bit higher is I do one-night stays, and most people don't. I don't mind that. A one-night stay for me is they come, they sleep, they leave. At the most, I have to spend about 20 minutes over there and get it cleaned up for the next guest. But it's probably somebody that I would not have gotten. And as I'm building my reputation and my business, I feel like that's a good way to do it.
So that's how she did it. Just something to think about. And if you want some more guidance, Airbnb has information on their website that you can look up. Again, you might want to look at the hotel rates around you. I think if you're comparing yourself to a hotel, I would think that you could charge a little bit more because you're giving them experience. If you've got a kitchen, you know, they can kind of come and go. That's totally up to you. But if your rates are considerably higher, you need to have a good justification. You need to note that in your profile. Why? And it could be the experience, that I want that outdoor, I want away from off the grid. I know a lady in Allegheny said that she had people come from D.C. because, you know, that's pretty close, and then that's what they wanted. They wanted off the grid. They didn't want cell service because you have to go a mile down the road and you have to be standing a certain direction, a certain way before you can get even cell service. But that's what they wanted. Again, you have to know your audience. You do want to have some kind of cancellation policies in place. They can be flexible, but for example, you don't want somebody, if you have a luxury home or you are booked up and then someone cancels at the last minute and you've been declining customers, you've got to have something to where you can at least get some kind of money back out of it. So you need to have some type of cancellation policy in place. Think of policies like for large regional events like the Bristol Motor Speedway. When you're looking at in Abington, you know, we're thinking about Rhythm and Roots, Damascus Days, but there's David's got information he can share with you on all the events, major events that are coming up here in this region. But these are things that you need to think about because you don't want lost revenue. That's not what we want, so you want to be prepared. Refunds, resolutions, if in some cases you may have 2 people on your account on Airbnb, but only one is the administrator. When Airbnb does a refund, it has to go to that administrator's account. And when you do want to be able to have a good ratings, and the way Airbnb does it is they usually keep those up 6 months to a lifetime depending on the property, and you always want to have excellent service. Again, you want to become a super host, and there's some great videos on YouTube. I did a lot of learning on YouTube videos and putting this presentation together because I don't have a Airbnb. I've just stayed at them. So I wanted to make sure I covered all the bases here from these professionals, and that's why I had Eva and these others helping me do this presentation today. Another important thing, if you are in a neighborhood or an area that you have close neighbors, I highly recommend that you discuss your plans with your neighbors. The worst thing that could happen is if you've got one of that neighbor that does something that has signs at the entrance, guests not welcome, or a neighbor can help you or they can hurt you, and you want them to help you. They want to be good friends. If something happens and you can't be there and they have a question, you want to have that relationship that they understand that you are monitoring this. You're going to try to control the audience as well as you can, and you can control your audience, by the way, on Airbnb. You can check up guests on the account. So if someone wants to make a reservation, if your neighbor down the road had a bad experience, they can share that on Airbnb, by the way. So you have that control. and that's available on the website. And you can't usually do that in a hotel per se unless you see an article on Google Alerts or something like that. But have your neighbors as your friends, not your foes. Airbnb is a software, and you know software technology can sometimes have bugs, so you need to periodically make sure that all your information about your property is correct, your house rules, your policies, and so forth. Again, that's up to you. It's not Airbnb's responsibility. If they had a software glitch and it changed your term limits or your number of guest limits and so forth, you need to make that a habit to go in there and check to make sure your information is correct. And hopefully you're going in there periodically anyway, because again, if a big event is coming to Tazewell County, you want to capitalize on that. So hopefully you're changing that or you're adding that to your profile. That hey, you know, we are supporter, or if you're coming into town for this event, or we are just a few miles, or however you give that in that description to help folks. Now, if you've never, is anybody not stayed at an Airbnb? Okay, so for those that have never stayed, my friend Vivek is going to walk you through of actually going on Airbnb and booking a property to stay.
Start by loading your browser. Today we're going to book an accommodation or a home as a guest. When you land on the Airbnb page, you have three options. You can either book homes, a place for you to stay, experiences if you want to book an outdoor recreation event or any other experience like a tour, or restaurants. Today we're going to focus on booking a home for this particular tutorial. Start by the place that you want to rent at. We're going to start with Abingdon, Virginia. As I said earlier, you can either book a home or an experience. We're going to do accommodations today. There are 91 homes available in that area. You have a lot of options to pick the dates you want to stay at, guests, home type, price, instant book, trip type, and more filters. We'll walk through each of these categories. Start by the dates. These are the 5 days that I'd like to book my property. Number of guests. For the sake of this tutorial, let's do 2 guests, 2 children. You can see that the number of available homes decreases or is very selective depending on what you choose in terms of the dates and the number of guests. The map is a real-time visualization of the properties that are available and listed geographically. Home type. You have the option of either getting an entire place for yourself or a room within a private home. Price is an important consideration. Typically, it says here the average nightly price is around $198, so I would put my filter at about $200. Instant Book allows you to make a request to book a place without host approval, without waiting for host approval. I usually like to ask questions of the host, so I don't automatically select this. Your trip type, of course, is for families or for work. This, again, I don't usually fill out. Now, under More Filters, you have a large variety of options. You can look at how many beds or bedrooms you want. I'm going to pick 2 bedrooms, at least 1 bathroom. Some people will pick 2. Superhosts are hosts that have been reviewed quite extensively and are experienced Airbnb homes. If you need accessibility, that is an option as well. You can choose specific home features. Most commonly, these are the different amenities available. Almost all of the homes have them. But if you want something very specific, uses and facilities that you like, the type of property. Some people like houses, others apartments. And since I have pets, I will choose pets. And you can see now that these are my options for places that I can actually book. Let's start by the first one. This tells you a little bit about the property. You can see Robin is a superhost. It talks about check-in. These are all the details. I almost always read about this space to get a sense of where this might be. One of the things that she talks about in her place is that it's a very locally, right in the middle of everything, right here in Abington. And if I'm interested and I like this place, again, it has 2 separate bedrooms. One has queen beds and 2 single beds, which is great for a couple and 2 children. It's pet friendly. The dates that I requested are available. And in all of the reviews, she has very high ratings. You can see she's 5-star. I like this property. And in order to book it, all you have to do is hit the book button. This allows you to then book the property that you're looking at.
Questions? That's pretty hard, wasn't it? You know, you might want to,
You can also do searches of other places in case this is not something that you want. And if you want something cheaper or in a different part, you can look at this property, for example, by clicking on the map. This is a mountain retreat. And this tells you a little bit about that property. So I always do a research of a couple of different properties and try to identify what's best. Again, it says here, read more about the space. It talks about the cost and all the amenities. Again, it has 2 bedrooms and enough for multiple guests. Some guests require a 1-night minimum stay, while others may require more. And if you want, you can read the reviews. It tells you a little bit more about the property, where it might be located, what amenities it has. I rely often on reviews to get a good sense of it. And then when you're ready, you just have to book the property.
I was started to say that once you set your account up, you might want to pretend like you're booking on your own property to kind of feel that experience. You just, of course, you won't hit book, but you know, check out. But again, the best info that I could give you is go look at your competition and what others are seeing. And when you're looking at those, you're going to see the good, and you're also going to see the not so good, and you don't want to be the not so good. Now, insurance, when you do set up an account on Airbnb, you do have some host protection insurance that automatically comes with it. And I won't read through all of that. You can go to their website and see, but I would still strongly encourage you to talk with your insurance agent that you have the property with. Let them know what you're going to be doing. And if it's only, $10, $20 more a month, it might be well worth it to add that on. At least they need to be aware that you're going to be using this as a short-time stay property. I wouldn't want you to have anything to happen that, oh, you didn't tell us you were doing this. I just thought it was just for a family that came. So that, it's best to be on the side of safe and let them know exactly what you're going to be doing and identify what's covered and what's not. Any questions? Did that answer your question, Margie, about insurance? Okay. Now, tax. Yes, you got to do it. You got to collect it, and you got to pay it. Bonnie's going to go over how they do it because she's in 2 different states, and it's interesting. They have 2 different ways of doing it. In the same way, the lady that just stepped out, she has property in Buchanan and Tazewell, and it'll be interesting to see the difference between those 2, just those 2 counties, of what the tax collection is going to be.
Well, I hear a lot of people say,
compliance with some rule, but I'm also shut down, and what do I do now? So I highly recommend that all hosts contact their local governments and find out what the regulations are and how to comply with them. And it's really not been a big deal in either case for me. Montana is different than Arizona, so I have that experience of working with both. Just to give you an example of what you might expect, Montana expects me to have a fire inspection, just to make sure I have the, fire extinguishers, and also I had to do a health inspection. I had to fill out some paperwork that said what temperature how I'm going to handle laundry, and that I'm washing them on hot and dry and on high heat, that sort of thing. And they actually came in and did an inspection in that home to check to make sure that everything that I said I was doing was actually happening. Arizona's a whole different ballgame. They just said, here's some paperwork to fill out for your taxes, and go have at it. So, you may find it's on the very easy end of the spectrum. You may find it's a little bit more work, but at least from my perspective, neither of them is completely daunting. It's just fine. And I'm also fortunate that Airbnb has decided to, are working with both states to collect the taxes. I know you were asking about taxes as well. So they're collecting and remitting the taxes for me. So it's completely, I won't say completely out of my hands, but the money part of it is what I now have to do, and I just found this out recently. So I'm just going to put this out there so that people know. If they're doing that for Virginia or any other place that you're helping people get started, check and see if you need to file anyway. Correct. Because I went the whole year without filing, and found out, I was supposed to file and say, here's what I collected, the deduction is that amount, and then from there, I didn't owe anything, I just needed to fill out that paperwork.
I understand. So even though Airbnb had collected that for you, the filing is important, and you did that because the state required that. Good, that is helpful information. Thank you.
That's why it's important that you check locally with what's required, and some counties are working with Airbnb to do the collection. I think Montgomery County about 2 months ago passed to allow Airbnb to do the tax collection, but a lot of counties haven't done that yet, so you need to check.
Is that just for the lodging tax?
Yes.
Okay, because being here from the commissioner's office, we assess personal property, and that's another. It's kind of weird with Airbnb because some people live in their homes, and then some people don't, and they're going to have a depreciation schedule, and it's just really. I thought you remember songs? Yeah. And they purchase a few things, can I say, just specifically for the home, the jail here they may be renting out.
We purchased a second building that we don't know what we're gonna do with. Yeah.
That's why it's important that you reach out to your Commissioner of Revenue, Circuit Court, whoever does that within your town, county.
Building inspector.
And David, do you? Yes, you do.
The town has the transient occupancy tax, which is going up in Tazewell in July.
Let's talk about transient occupancy taxes for just a second.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No, yes, this is perfect time.
Tazewell County has a transient occupancy tax that is effective everywhere in the county except the town of Tazewell. It is 5%. Virginia's transient occupancy tax for any locality maximum is 2%. And then some localities can go up to 5%, but anything over that 2% must be reinvested in tourism. Kind of gets complicated, but basically, when you collect that 5% outside the town of Tazewell, then you're funding the tourism department to market your place. Does that make sense? So Cindy is basically collecting a tax for us to market her.
But we pay the town of Tazewell, which is 5%.
And they have to do the same thing.
7% July 1st in the town of Tazewell.
They have to do the same thing, but we don't have any control over that. So if you're in the town of Pocahontas, you collect a 5% occupancy tax for the town and a 5% occupancy tax for the county.
10%.
Yeah. Richland, and that's not uncommon if you look at hotel taxes when you go stay somewhere, anywhere. Richlands has told us that they're getting ready to do the same thing. Basically, you're either in the town of Tazewell, you're paying the town of Tazewell to market you, anywhere else you're paying the county to do that marketing for you.
And that is
So-
filed monthly too.
How you market when the internet's there? You can market yourself on the internet.
Well, you can, but are you gonna market the back of the Dragon, or the OP Trail, or the Clinch River, or the other things that are gonna bring people that make them
It
want to
doesn't
stay
matter
there?
if they market you or not, you gotta pay the tax.
Right.
I know. Yeah, that's going right.
But you're saying, you're saying in Pocahontas, you gotta pay a town occupancy and a county
Right.
occupancy, plus the sales tax.
Right.
So their total tax is like 15%.
I don't know what their total tax is.
Because
Our
the
only
state of
concern,
Virginia's 5.3 sales.
our only concern is the transient occupancy tax. So I don't know what their,
Well, to
and
clarify.
Bluefield
you
doesn't
might
have
wanna
one
find out.
because Bluefield currently has no beds.
That's,
Richlands doesn't really have beds, but they're getting ready to have some beds. So as these come along, then the other towns are also going to pass the taxes because it's a revenue stream to come in.
Well, when you say transient occupancy, so if you're renting your space to somebody for a year, that
It's
doesn't,
under 30 days.
under 30 days.
That's why I was said earlier about the nurses up in Clifton Forge. The lady, every 29 days, they have to re-rent the space.
And Cindy, there are some places, like Williamsburg, for example, where you're paying the, well, not Williamsburg, but Jamestown, where you're paying the town, the county, plus the sales tax for state, plus there's regional bed tax on top of that. So, you know, these things get expensive, but all that can be charged on top of what, if you're charging $100 a night, and you're adding on to that $100.
And that's what we tell our people, the rate is this amount per night plus this amount tax per night, so that they know up front that it's not just that flat fee, it's this.
And those go to the finance director for the county, not the commissioners. But I'd say as we get more and more of these, and we do a search about every 6 months to see if there are new ones, then we may work with Airbnb to do collections, but right now we don't.
And I can tell you, the lady that said, you know, it's better to ask forgiveness, we did not do that. We worked with the commissioner's office, we worked with town hall right here. The treasurer here was wonderful in helping me understand the tax things. We worked with the building inspector. I mean, we did it all. And I had people who said to me, you are just asking for trouble, asking all these questions up front. No, it was much easier for us.
Yeah, you don't want to pay that fine or anything.
Or find out that I had not done something I should have done during the renovation process, yeah.
Anything you want to add?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, if you're in the county, you also have to get a business license
Yes.
on top of paying the tax.
You know, the towns, all 5 towns have business licenses. The county does not.
And it has to be displayed.
Any other questions about
We're also
taxes?
not zoned out in the county, but all 5 towns have zoning.
Just something to put on your to-do list to check on. Any other questions? I'm just going to go past here. Again, check on your local regulations for short-term rental. The requirements are, again, do your homework at the beginning, then to get in trouble and get your hands smacked, because would you smack people's hands? You've probably been hearing too on the news or saw some videos of where some Airbnb hosts have been having surveillance cameras and not telling the guests. That is a big, big, big no-no in Airbnbs. If you are going to have equipment, you must notify and let the guests know it. Either you put it in your profile. You know, if you have like Eva, she has like a notebook when guests arrive on a table that goes through, outlines everything, even how to use that remote control and where to find extra linens and so forth, that you have that laid out there. But you need to let your guests know if you are having any kind of surveillance devices in your homes. Okay?
Question, is that just inside? Because what we have, that it would be a remote location. It would be more like a lodge than a cabin.
I would still, I think to be safe, I would say that you have cameras on the exterior, which I recommend that. Because I have friends that have Airbnbs and they highly recommend it. A, that you make sure that there's no party. If you say you're going to have 6 guests, there's not 30 cars in the parking area. And that, you know, 2, that you know when they check in. So if there's any issues, you know, you kind of have an idea when they check in and when they check out, those kind of things to keep.
We wouldn't be so interested on the interior, but definitely on the exterior.
Yes, just I think though you still need, even if it's a, yeah, even if it's a thing on the window or on the door, that you put that on there, that it's exterior only.
There's an option, Eva's got it listed on hers, and on Airbnb, I was just on.
So make sure you do that. And then, you know, Airbnb helps you a lot in promoting and marketing your property. And Eva's going to share a little bit about what they have to say.
In my case, I let Airbnb do everything. You can, and they will give you some advice on if you want to embed your links and different things. I haven't done that yet. I probably will. But they've done such a good job in marketing that I haven't felt the need to do it. All I have to do really is make sure the guest is taken care of and they have a good place to stay. Airbnb has done the rest for me. If you want to do more than that, I think you could. I haven't chosen to.
But I will say that if you do create property, I would definitely let David and AJ know, because when people are coming and they're asking for places to stay, you want to make sure that they know, let your Chamber of Commerce know that you have property available, because you want that referral. And, you know, if for some of our larger manufacturers industry here too, for executives that are traveling in, that may be here installing equipment for a week or what have you, all it is a phone call. I think out of courtesy and to help you is just to let them know, hey, you've got property available that you do short-term rental. Well, it's certainly not going to hurt. But I would definitely get it out there and let folks know.
Sandy, what's the flexibility like an Uber driver? An Uber driver can decide when they want to drive and when they don't. Do Airbnb allow you as to when you're going to put your properties?
You can snooze your property, like for example, maybe from December to February. I don't want to be fooled with it. You can snooze your property. All your info is going to be there, but it won't be seen in the searches. And you do have that option.
Plus, you can block out dates that you,
Yeah.
you know, if you're going to be gone for a week or whatever, you block it.
Or if you're having a family reunion and it's something personal that you need your properties for, you know, you don't want to have it on there and people trying to book it. But you can snooze, they call it snooze it. Airbnb is a little different than social media. You know, some of the things that comes in handy to kind of get your search up there is, you know, some people love washer and dryer, coffee maker. If you are open access for wheelchair compliant, if your property, I would definitely add that to that. If you're pet friendly, include that, because some guests, that's some of the hot tickets that they're looking at.
Do you have to be ADA compliant to get Airbnb?
I don't think so. I don't.
Eva's got it listed that they're not.
It's not public property. It's personal property that you're just renting out.
Well, Ava's got 15 stairs, so
She's
she
not.
has that listed, she's like, there are
15
15
stairs.
stairs. Yeah, she's like, so it's not
You're not going to wheelchair that.
She's
Yeah.
like, it's not recommended.
And if you have a lot of luggage, that means 15 steps multiple times getting it in and out of the car. Some other things too, make sure that photo is great, and the title of your property. You know, if you've not named it, you want to think of something catchy. You know, I don't know why Eva came up with River Cliff other than it overlooks the river, the Clinch River. You want to create some kind of curiosity, so, you know, I said earlier, your profile, find your niche. What makes you unique? And again, your audience that you're wanting to target. How you're going to appeal to them? What's those buzzwords that they look at? Airbnb also keeps account of how often your properties are listed, and I think that if they see that you're not getting any activity, they might send you a little note and say, we've seen that all these bookings have been around you, but you've not gotten anything, you might want to change this. They might give you that courtesy because they're going to make money off of you, so they want to make sure that you're successful. I also suggest if you have Facebook, social media platforms that you use, both personal and for you, if you have other businesses, you might want to include your property in the link on Airbnb where they can do that reservation and find out more. It's not going to hurt you anything. And one other thing I don't have here too, I think it's kind of neat if you do a video of your property inside and out and show that uniqueness. I don't know if you noticed on the pictures that I showed of Eva's property as she was talking, did you see where she had sheets hanging on the clothesline? Doesn't that give you that little warm, cozy appeal? It's those little hidden touches that you don't think a whole lot, but it just gives you that looks like a little neat place that I could unwind and write my book, like one of her guests had. The other thing I would recommend is stay up to date on the trends in the market. In everything, we as a society, we have our hot buttons for a while and then they go cold and something else. Is just stay up to date on what's going on in the market around you, locally, and in the Airbnb world. And you can do that easily. You can follow folks. Hopefully you're going to be getting information from Airbnb if you select that to receive information. But everything you do, you want to cater to travelers. And again, David and AJ should be your good friends because they're going to help you, and even Michelle from tourism. You want to know, you want those referrals, and you want to know what activities are coming up, because if it's a big thing, I can jack up my price a little bit for that weekend. Because of law and supply and demand. That's my basics of economics. Economics was laws of supply and demand. And then the experience.
I don't view my location, I take my location and try to promote it in a positive way, but I don't hide the fact that I am 17 miles from a grocery store. I don't hide the fact that I'm 12 miles from a gas station, because they are looking for what I call off the grid, an outdoor experience, a place that's quieter, and so they accept that. But I do want to always communicate that ahead of time because they need to bring their groceries. They can't just run down to the store because it's going to be a little jaunt. I don't think that's a negative for Southwest Virginia for folks who are thinking about this, because what's going to set them aside is they're offering a place to stay. If there was a grocery store there might be a hotel there. Probably there's neither. But if you give them a clean place to stay, you have bottled water waiting on them, maybe a few snacks or things like that, and you've told them that they're in a remote area to bring some sandwich making supplies and things, they're all about that. And what we love is people coming out and saying, this is absolutely beautiful. I love the deer grazing in the backyard. Or hiking our property, something we take for granted. They'll say, we want to hike out there. And of course, then I have to tell them what the boundaries are, so they're not hiking on our lands, where our land is. But Southwest Virginia is beautiful. We forget it. Other people don't. We take it for granted. But when we package it right and people visit, we can take that natural resource and we can add on jingle to our pocket.
I like it. Jingle to your pocket. That's what we want, right? She's a great marketer for Southwest Virginia because she loves doing this and she loves helping. A friend of mine, folks know David Height from Bluefield College. David has got an Airbnb property across the line, and I asked David, he kept saying the experience. You want that experience from your guests. And I said, well, what kind of things do you do to help with that experience? And he shared a couple with me. He does have video cameras. They're on the exterior. That way, where he can know when they arrive and how many guests are there. If it matches the reservation, you want to keep track of that. He also has these smart power outlets, which he knows if you're going to be checking in at a certain time, from his phone, he can have the lamps on or turn on things that make it, it gives you that experience. You don't want to have those things going all day long, but if they're coming in the evening and it's dark outside, he can have lights turned on, or he can even have maybe music playing in the background. And then he's also got one of these keypad deadbolt locks that he can program from his phone, from the app, and that means that if a guest is having trouble unlocking it, he can help them remotely, but also when they check out, he can change the combination on that lock and do that. So those are a little pricey, the deadbolt locks, but depending on where you live, because I have Airbnb folks that live 2 hours away from some of their property, so it's not so easy for them to jaunt over and to try to help someone. But just some things you might want to think about. Some house rules that you may want to consider getting into this is I have friends that have Airbnbs that when someone's booking a room, they want to know if they're local or not, and you're wanting to know why is that important. If it's someone locally in your community, that's probably because they're going to have a party, and they want to know that, so they weed them out that way. So why, if you're in Abington, you live in Abington and you're booking a room in Bristol just across the line, why are you doing that? You can find out those kind of things. Not to say that anybody would do that, but it's possible. Again, having your occupancy limits, state your limits on your property at all times in your rules, everything that's online. If you do a notebook, you could have something in a little holder on the door, pinned to it, but have that stated. If you have a self-check-in on the property, write out the rules that you certify that you are willing to be able to follow all the instructions provided on Airbnb to help keep down any confusion that folks have and getting into your property. Something else, if your property is in an apartment complex or gated community, you better know those guidelines. And if it is a gated, how do your guests get past the gate to get onto the property? So also if you have certain assigned, if it's an apartment complex, you have certain parking spaces assigned, you better make sure they're parking in the right space. Again, that's knowing your neighbors. I've had people that their cars were towed because they were not in the right space. If you have any additional fees, for example, if you have a non-smoking property and somebody smokes, they know that they're going to have to pay $200 per day smoking fee. If they are late on checkout and they did not pre-authorize, get authorization from you to check out late, you add another $50 onto it. You need to spell all of that out, that there's no question. So some of those things that I didn't think about. Again, about if there's a key that they have access to, parking tag, or any of those, that if they lose it and you have to replace it, that there's going to be a cost associated with it. Outline it out. This is your property. You want to make sure you're protected before the first person, you get that first jingle in your pocket. Some properties will require a pre-screening before stay. Put that in the rules, especially if you are wanting them to pass a criminal background check. You got to lay that out in your rules. And some people put a retaliation clause in there, which means if they have an issue with you and Airbnb takes it up and it rules in your favor as the owner, the host, that they cannot retaliate against you. That's either going out on the internet, putting defamatory information about you. You can have a retaliation clause. These are all things that you can consider. I just wanted to share that with you. In summary, do your homework. see what the market in your area is, how much you can charge for your rates. Reach out to your chambers, your tourism, economic development professionals. Identify all tax and regulations that are required. I'm glad that you were here today. Get your house and property in top shape. Don't do it half. I won't say the other word, but make sure it's in tip-top, because you want that experience the first time out the gate. You want people saying, you got to stay here, it was great, they did this little thing, you know. You can go to Sam's Club and get you some breakfast bars or granola bars and have some of that if they are, you know, are hungry. You know, you can have fresh fruit for them, those kind of things. Reach out to other short-term property owners, learn from their experience. That's why I reached out to Eva and the Abani just to find out their experience. And David, if you know somebody that's operating one, ask them. Just get you a list of questions and find out, because I'm sure at some point they've got their hands smacked and butts whooped a couple of times. So you want to learn from their experience and go from there. But don't be afraid to ask for help. I know we want you to be successful here, because we have a lot riding on it in Southwest Virginia, because when people come and have a great experience, they're going to tell others, and that's what we want. We want your guests telling others what a great place Southwest Virginia is. I'm not only talking about your property, but the overall region. And we're in this together, and that's why Virginia Community Capital is out here doing this program, is that we want to help Southwest Virginia grow and be successul. So, any questions?
What are the horror stories you've heard from Airbnb?
I don't know if you were in here about the folks that had the tiny house and somebody had a party and just trashed the place. That's probably one of the biggest. The parties is what I've heard, even down in Berea College. You know, they do some Airbnb and training, and I asked them what were some of the horror stories that your guests that have done it, and it was that the guests that they didn't control, they didn't have their guidelines in place. You know, they had a party or what have you. That's why keeping up with the locals. I think that's the biggest one that I've heard is the parties.
Is there any responsibility of Airbnb for property damage, or is that all?
Well, when you have a profile or account with them, you have a insurance through them. You can look there. I even had a slide that shows what it covers and what it doesn't. If anybody wants a copy of this presentation, probably won't have the videos in it, but I can give you the hard copies. If you've got my card, just drop me an email, and I'll be happy to send you the link. It's pretty big to email, but I'll convert it to a PDF and send it to you. Be happy to share that.
Is there a high-end market for Airbnb people, or are these more budget-concerned shoppers? If you wanted to put an astronomical price tag on your property to really limit who you were getting, $300 a night, $400 a night for an experience, is that part of?
I think there is no rules. I think it totally goes up to your audience and who you're targeting. There are those that, again, I keep going back to Back of the Dragon, that want that experience, that are car hobby. You know, the MG Club that came through here last year?
We had almost 200 clubs last year.
But those are folks that are car hobbyists that are probably a little bit above the middle income, that they're looking for experience. You know, you may set a rate and you see, gosh, I'm getting hits, but nobody is renting, so then you might need to do some adjustments from there. If you are going to be the high end, I would put in your profile what makes you different, what is unique about your property. It could be that you've got, if it's an ATV, that you've got a water hose and equipment where they can wash down their equipment, or you have a garage that they can park their car in. Those little things, those little niches that appeal to your target audience. And we know that every audience has something that appeals to them. is just pointing that out. Anybody operating an Airbnb now? Did I forget anything, or is there anything you'd like to add that maybe I did?
I think you covered it well.
Well, David, you be sure you note that. Well, I thank you for coming.
It's real easy to get on, and there's no upfront cost.
No, and you're only charged if you have a property.
They take 3%.
Mhm.
So what would be the advantage? I have two properties, my husband and I do. One is a 3-bedroom apartment that's not ready. The other's a 1-bedroom apartment that's newly remodeled and it's ready in Cedar Bluff. It's in the town of Cedar Bluff. And we're trying to decide, are we gonna do Airbnb or just rent it out? Has anybody got any? What is the advantage doing Airbnb and then rent it out?
With the taxes they're gonna put on it, I'd just rent it out straight.
It's kind of what I was thinking, listening to it, but I know we're here for tourism, and that's what we want.
I don't know why y'all put this 5% tax. Is that just common throughout the
Well,
world?
it's way you as a resident money later on.
Ordinance.
There's a huge desire to collect tax from visitors as opposed to locals, so that you can avoid imposing a 5-cent increase on the personal property tax of your residents. You impose a tax
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
that will get your transient people
So
coming
the
in.
income from your Airbnb should be prorated to your property tax.
Well, but you can't really balance it out. What you do is if you have a thriving tourism industry, then that income allows you to keep a property tax rate that's considerably lower than your competing neighbors. So, if you have that source of revenue from a governing standpoint, you don't have to have as high a property tax. So, it's one of those things that we look at and we strive in Tazewell County to try and capture whatever money we can from visitors. That's where our meals tax was such a disappointment when it failed, because that was almost $1 million worth of income projected to capture from potentially out-of-towners that we didn't get. So when you need $1 million, the only thing we are capable of doing is you go back and you raise that property tax rate. So it hurts because you're doing it as a tax, and you see a 5%, 10%.
But if y'all come in with big business or business that's coming in, y'all give tax rate, bringing people in.
Yeah.
The startup business earns B&B should get the same courtesy check.
But you're not paying the tax, your customer is. See, we're not taxing you as a business owner. We're not making you pay 5% of a $100 occupancy. We're not taking the money from you. We're taking the money from your guest. We're adding a 5% tax on to what they're paying, your rate.
Right.
So it's not coming from you.
We're because that's got to up my rate.
No, you can lower your rate whatever you want. Whatever your rate is.
Goes on top of your rate.
Whatever your rate is.
We don't see it, we collect it and then we pay it right back out. It doesn't affect my rate at all.
You get to keep a little bit of it for collecting it.
And it can hurt you if you have a bad rate. Judge Marinsky down in McDowell County, love Judge Marinsky, won't come to Bluefield, Virginia because he looks at that meals tax. He says, I'm not going to do it. I am not going to. So you're going to have the occasional person who's going to say, your tax rate is too high on this particular event. I'm not going to do it, but that is the exception, not the rule. Everywhere I travel, when you check out and you finally take 2 seconds to look at that hotel bill, you're like, my God almighty, the taxes, when you combine them, are almost as much as what you're paying on the road.
Yeah, especially if you're going to a major city and so forth. But as you said, you outlined that this is your rate, and then the taxes, you note that on your, yeah. So that's up to you. Do you want to tie up that property for, what do you do, a 1-year limit for a rental?
So putting the taxes on the person that's better. I do.
Yeah,
Takes off a little of the pay.
you're not paying it, the guest is. You're just noting that.
You're right, I don't pay attention to
And
it.
you file that state sales tax and the transient occupancy every month. You do those every month on your sales for the previous month.
Yeah, I think I was trying to think which Highland County, they give you like a payment book, like each year for your Airbnb, and each month you just take that stub off like you were making a payment, and you send that in with how much tax you collected, and you send that payment in. They do it like a payment book when you bought your.
Stack of them here, and you just send it in, take one, send it in.
We've not had a single person complain about
They're going to pay taxes anywhere they go.
If you go to the Holiday Inn, or you go to the Comfort Inn, or wherever you're going to pay. So it's just part of the deal.
The difference, I would say, and we're starting to lose the room in 5 or 6 different conversations on.
Right.
But the difference in renting, I have an apartment over our garage. I could rent that by the month for $300 or $400 a month, or I could rent that 6 or 7 times a month for $100 a night.
You can make more money.
So that's the difference in the two.
And see, I was thinking when you said that in Cedar Bluff, is that where you said you property? You know, the hospital and the clinic, I would go the first place there when there's got somebody, a traveling doctor that wants short-term stay. It's the first place I would go if you decide you're going to go with short-term Airbnb route.
Well, the other thing is Southwest Virginia Community College is getting ready to, where they've already added these athletic programs and things, so we're seeing a lot of parents that are coming to visit, or even actually looking for housing for the students. So.
Mary Ann talked to me about that. We're just trying to solve it. What's the difference in Airbnb and the cabins? If you go to Gatlinburg and you rent those cabins, it's the same philosophy? Are those considered Airbnbs?
Probably VRBO. I mean, Airbnb and VRBO are both similar.
Or do they use the real estate?
Use both.
Yeah.
But it's the same difference, isn't it?
Same concept. They're all cousins.
They probably have a big umbrella insurance. They're going, and you do it through the property management service.
It's just allows you. Our cottage is supported by the museum, which is a nonprofit organization. Does it have water? Is it allowed to market through this Airbnb? Or does it have to be a private code owned by individuals?
I don't know that that Airbnb has a stipulation to it. It's however you have it set up. I think that going by Airbnb, you'll get more traffic because of just, it's the Amazon of short term.
You said it best. It's really a marketing arm for your property. And you're paying X amount for the marketing that they do because you have these millennials. That's the only place they'll go and look. Because they're going to go stay somewhere, they'll look at Airbnb or VRBO. They won't look anywhere else. I've got a daughter-in-law that she'll only look on Yelp for places to go eat. She won't look anywhere else. And that's what you basically get at. We don't do it yet. We're probably going to. We haven't made our mind up. But I had this guy from Bluefield College tell me you better be ready when you sign up to Airbnb or VRBO because you're going to start getting a lot of traffic.
Your rentals, your number of rentals are going to increase. And one thing where it said all this special features you have, we put a washer and dryer in over here at the old jail, and my husband argued with me.
All right, don't put your dirty laundry out with all of us.
Especially if they're staying several days. We even had Tazewell hosted a senior league baseball tournament last May, and they had umpires stay in different places. And one of our umpires finished his stay and he left, and we got a call from another one who was at the Comfort Inn in Bluefield, and he said, "I'm moving to your place because you have a washer and dryer, and umpires obviously need to wash their clothes." And he had not been able to wash his clothes for 2 days. So.
Well, even the motorcycles, I have been caught in a downpour on a motorcycle and you want to dry your clothes.
Anything else?
Wonderful program.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. I have my cards. I have info on the challenge. Anything, I'll be happy.
Anybody wants to see our property, and you can look right there.
I need a card.
You got it. Just 1 second. Let me shut this down.